Hey guys, welcome to the Clip Studio Paint Foliage Brushset demo. I'm going to take you through how each one of these brushes works first, some settings you can play with if you want to adjust them yourself, and then after we go through that, I'm doing a demo at the end. I recorded the process of painting the cover image for this brush set, like what you saw when you went to download them. So that's at the end. So if you want to skip to that, you're welcome to. But first, I'm just going to go through these brushes. Since there's 90, I'm going to move kind of quickly through ones that are repetitive. But I just want to kind of show you how I was intending for these to be used. Obviously, you can use them however you want. It is up to you. And lots of people have done really creative things with the Photoshop and Procreate set that is totally different than anything that I would have, and I think that's awesome. So yeah, these are just kind of like my suggestions, but of course don't let that limit your creativity. So first, let's start with the grass block-in brushes. And just kind of as a general tip, some of these brushes have blending on, which is kind of a cool function of Clip Studio Paint. And let me show you what this is. This is under the ink setting. So if you open the subtool detail panel and you go to this ink section here, you can see that some of them have color mixing on and it's set to blend. You can adjust how much paint these brushes have and it will blend in various amounts with whatever paint is on that layer beneath where you're painting. So definitely play around with this because I think this is a really fun feature of Clip Studio. And if you intend to play around with them, then you can actually just turn these little eyes on and this will pop up in your tool property panel here and you can adjust them. But if you don't intend to adjust it, if you like them, like I kind of set them up how I would use them, so I turn those off. But if you are the kind of person who wants to play around with those, then any of the brushes that have this turned on, you could just turn these eyes on and it will save these onto this little panel here for you to play with. So I'm going to go ahead and close this. For the grass block-in brushes, they make this kind of texture and pattern, and essentially the way that I intend for them to be used is to just kind of like lay in your grass, your fields, and you can layer them. And I recommend making little like pockets of shadow and pockets of light like this. And this one has blending on, so it kind of blends nicely with what is beneath it. And as it goes back in space, you can get thinner so that it feels like, it's like turning over in form. And that is kind of the basic grass block-in brush. Then I have a solid one, which is the same thing, but it doesn't have any blending on it. It's totally solid. So this is for if you're going for a little bit more of a like maybe cartoony or animated look, or if you just want your base to be a bit more solid and not as painted, then this brush does the same thing, just with a more solid appearance. This brush is softer. So this is a grass block-in brush that is similar, but has a softer appearance. So going the other direction. This is a grass clump brush, which just creates little clumps of grass. This one's actually unique to Clip Studio. So you can kind of use them together. You can see how it starts to look like a field. This is a distant grass block-in brush. So this is for, getting the appearance of that grass like turning over in space and going back, receding back into the distance. This is one of the first texture brushes, so you can see the kind of pattern that it makes. It's just brushing on little details on top of what we've painted. And then these are just more of that. So I've got a bunch of different texture brushes in here. This one is just a solid version with no mixing. Little blade details. Like that. More little blade details. Again, these are lots of different versions of the same brush, so I'll move kind of quickly so it's not boring, but these are all just brushes that are made to be used to texture your fields that you have just painted. I like this one. This one's one of my favorites. And you can kind of see how they're designed. Just brush across and it creates the grass texture. This is for kind of closer up grass, so you know, as we're kind of moving towards the camera, we can brush this on and it will feel like it's, you know, more dimensional. And then this is the same thing but a little more solid, so there we got that. This is just another shape of kind of grass for the front that's a little more straight up and down rather than curved. Same thing, but softer for adding texture. And then these are some grass detail brushes. You can see it just kind of, they're intended to be used with a lighter color and they have dimension to them. So you can see that when I brush on top of the darker color, the way that they are shaded makes it look like it's got dimension. And you can use this farther away too. You can see how it kind of feels dimensional. They're meant to be used with a lighter color on top of a darker color. And then this is the same thing, but a different shape. So just a different shape of dimensional brush. And then a third one, which is the same thing. This one's just kind of straighter grass rather than curved, but it also kind of feels like it has dimension. So now we've got our little field here. Then there's this soft, tall grass, which is kind of these like brushy shapes like this. Add a little bit of that around the edges. Maybe it gets a little warmer. See what I mean? Then we've got these plant stalks. So this is kind of the next section. These create the appearance of like plant stems or stalks. And if you brush more lightly, then it will get smaller. So you can use without adjusting the size, you can do like a heavy stroke and then, you know, like push less hard with the next few, and you can kind of create this like bush type appearance like this. These are more of the same, just in different shapes. So this one has some little leaves on it. See how they kind of look. Another shape. And then these ones are little plants, and you can see that it makes this shape. The way that I intend for it to be used is to kind of do something like that. So, you know, in the front here, you can see that we can use a darker color and brush on these plants, and it feels like there's little plants sitting in the grass here. Like this. Here's another shape. So it's another plant, but it's just a different shape. Here are flowers. So we're getting into the wildflowers. So these are little kind of like flower bulbs that have not bloomed yet. And then these are flowers that have bloomed. So same thing, same kind of flower, but these ones have bloomed. And then this is just kind of like a thicker flower that's bloomed. And for pretty much all of these, there are some settings that I would recommend kind of playing around with and getting used to. The first is that ink setting that you could turn blending on or off for any of these if you want them to blend more or less. So definitely like play around with turning on color mixing, seeing what it does, you know, using it to, you can adjust these brushes and make them, you know, however you want them to be, essentially, you know. So here I just turned the color mixing on. And you can also play around with this here, like this blend with subcolor. If I want these two colors to work together, you know, to blend with each other, then I have these on. So I have it set to pen pressure and also some random. And it, you know, it creates this variety of colors. And then you can also just turn that off if you don't want it. So you can go into this panel here and just uncheck these boxes and it won't do that anymore. And you can always turn this little eye on if you want to be able to control it more easily from right over there. So I would totally recommend like playing around with those settings and getting used to them, and like, you know, seeing how you want to use the brush. I would rather just have one copy of the brush and then edit it myself. But if you want to, you can just duplicate the brush by clicking here and then edit another version if you just want to be able to switch between them without having to go into your settings. You know, so if you want one that has more color blending on and one that has no color blending on, then you could just duplicate the brush, you know, rename it plus color blending or something like that, you know, move it next to it and adjust the settings. So totally like make these however you want them. I just kind of like put a version of each one in that is how I would probably use it, but you can use it in totally different ways, you know? Okay, so more wildflowers. These are kind of rounded, scattered wildflowers like this. Often I will like use these for like bushes, you know, kind of like soft looking wildflowers like this. This is the same thing, just a different shape, just like a single one. So like that. And then this is another shape of wildflower. You can see it's just that kind of like flat toward the ground, kind of like bloomed dandelion, like the dandelion flower shape. These are just some scattered wildflowers. And these all have, they're blending between these two colors here. So that's that one. These ones are kind of for like a bush, so let's see. Maybe this bush has these flowers on it here. They're just kind of like little round flowers. And then this is the same brush, but it's for like, it's flatter. See what I mean? So you can kind of do like the edges here with it. Like that. Or you can use it like in a field and it will like lay flat. These are more just scattered wildflowers. Kind of supposed to resemble poppies, but it can be anything you want. Throw some in there. Same thing, different shape. Just for some variety. I found that they look a lot less digital and like less stamp-like when you kind of mix it up and have multiple that look similar but not exactly the same. It looks a little more painted. So that's why there's so many different versions of each type of shape, so that it looks, you know, it can look a little more natural and painted in the paintings that you guys make. More just scattered wildflowers, kind of for the distance. And more. And more. So these are all just kind of distant, scattered wildflower shapes. So these are some wild plants. So these are usually intended to be used with lighter color, but it doesn't really matter. And you just kind of can, you know, make it look a little bit more wilderness-like it's kind of for adding noise. And this is another one of the same thing, like this. And you can kind of use them together. And see how that kind of makes it feel like brambles almost, that sort of thing. Then we've got dandelions. And dandelions that are a little more transparent. Ivy, so this is for like, you know, if you've got a tree, then you can have it kind of climbing up the tree. And another shape of ivy. And then we're gonna get into the trees now. So I'm gonna make a new layer for this. So this is the first tree block in. It's meant to be used kind of like this. You see we're kind of blocking in tree shapes like this. This is like treetops, you know. And then here's the same thing, but a little bit more opaque. More kind of comics or animation looking brush. This is another treetop brush. Lots of these guys. Another one. This one's got a little more details, so we're kind of starting to get into like the mid-ground area. See what I mean? You know, so that can be the distance, and this is like the mid-ground. This is a little detail, so you know, if you want to add a few of these little like offshoot branches like this, if that makes sense, kind of varying up the silhouette. And then this is a brush for creating the form and detail. And if we kind of use strokes like this, it will start looking like kind of the rounded tree foliage that we see. Same thing, but opaque. This is a texture brush, so it's meant for, so like, let me lay in a base first. So if, you know, we've got our tree shape here, then if I go here and grab this, it creates kind of the, you know, distant tree texture that we see. You know, this is from like far away, we're talking. And then this is to start laying on leaf detail. See that kind of pattern it creates? And then we've just got a bunch of different texture brushes. So many of these. Can make all sorts of different kind of branch and foliage shapes. You know, with this one, you can make a branch that's like hanging out like this. If you see kind of what I'm doing, you can layer it like that. Same sort of deal. That's too dark. There we go. Oops. Okay. Then we've got leaves. So these are just some scattered leaves that we can start adding like individual little leaf details in with, like this. Same thing, but facing toward us. So this is for foliage that's like facing directly toward us. And these ones, this one here, this shape works really great for like bushes and like low plants too. This one creates a little like line of leaves, so it's good for like the like offshoots of branches, you know, like what's hanging off of branches, that type of thing. Similar, just more leaf texture. This is a bush brush, and I'll use it in the demo later, but it's really useful. You can kind of block in a bush shape like this, and then block in light on top. Works for tree foliage too, but you can see how you can kind of start layering it and getting some pretty realistic looking like foliage shapes. And then we got some just basic leaf brushes that you can use. More leaves. These are kind of cutesy leaves. Very kind of anime. More, this is an evergreen tree. That's interesting. I must have miscategorized that. Oh, I think that's just this brush. Accidentally duplicated it and left that. All right, we're moving on to the evergreen trees. Let's go. So this is first a tree line brush. This is for like creating your silhouette, you know, in the distance, like on a mountainside. And then we've got all these different evergreen brushes that we can use on top like this, and it will start looking like trees. And you know, obviously we want to vary the silhouette up, make it not look so digital, so we use these brushes to do that. So there's that one, then there's this one, which is like a more barren tree. Get some layering going on. This one is another tree shape. Another kind of more barren tree. We just want to create a nice variety of shapes. It's going to add to the realism a lot. This one is like a totally empty trunk, kinda. This one is like closer up. Kind of like a mid-ground level tree. Another mid-ground level tree. This is for creating branches, so you can see how, like, if we're close up, we can just kind of brush along, and then if you press more lightly, then you can make little offshoots from your branch and make like totally, you know, original, unique branch shapes every single time, which is cool. And then this is to do little details with that. So this is, it's just this pattern. You can make little details. Okay, now we're gonna go on to the jungle brushes, which is the last little section. So this is to brush in kind of like cartoony jungle foliage, like that. This is for kind of jungle grass. This kind of deal. This is for just kind of like foggy, distant jungle foliage. Like that. These are some leaves. More. These are kind of like palm, kind of like this. Other direction, same thing. Coming from above, same thing. And then these are just some more little plants. And you don't need to use these just in a jungle setting. That's just kind of how I decided to categorize them, but you can use them in anything. And then just some more little leaves. And that is all of them. So next I will be doing the kind of painting demo. Let me see, is there anything else that I needed to talk about with these? Okay, let me just go into the brush panel real quick and show you guys, like, well, let me show you a few things. First of all, for making any changes to these brushes, I would recommend, like, if you are just doing it for the first time, you can just create a copy of any brush by clicking this, and it'll copy it. And then you can go in and edit that one, and then you don't have to be worried about losing the original settings, if that makes sense, and, you know, having to, like, totally reload it from the file. So then if you go into Subtool Detail, like, we could turn on color mixing here if we want it to mix with what's beneath it. Let's see, under the brush tip, you can make the tip thinner like this, or thicker if you wanted to. So here now I've got like kind of thinner leaves. Do you see that? I've got it on vertical, and I just squished it. I made the thickness more narrow. So now we've got a new brush shape. How cool is that? So you can do that with like all of these brushes. You can play around with that setting, you know, or we can go the other way, and wow, that probably doesn't work too well. But for others it might. So you can play around with the shape of the brush tip. You can give it more, you can give it some like angle jitter. So if you turn random on and pull the strength up, then see that? Now it's like going all different directions. So that could be cool for something. You know, maybe for a more design like flat design looking foliage. That's a cool pattern that we've got going on. So you can play with that. Let's see. Let's turn that off. In the stroke, you could make the gap wider, so then, you know, they'd show up less. See what I mean? Let me make a new layer so you guys can see what I'm doing. Now the gap is a lot bigger between them, or you can make the gap a lot smaller. Don't know that would be particularly useful, but you can adjust that. Let's see. Oh, you can, if you click on any of these things, you can like add randomness to it. So now the gap between them is going to be a lot more random. So like if I make that super, if I bring the minimum value all the way down, sorry, these are all kind of different, and turn the randomness on and make the gap less, then it's gonna kind of jitter it more, you know, so there's more randomness and it feels a little more organic. So you can always go into these extra little settings over on the side, like you can click these and you can turn on, you can add randomness to whatever you're doing. You can play around with those settings in there. And yeah, I totally recommend, like, you know, playing with these, making them work for how you want to use them. You know, I just built them as best I could for how I would probably use them, but use them however you want. You know, like they're yours to mess around with, make variations and whatnot. Cool. I guess I will move on to doing the voiceover for the demo now. Thanks for watching this little first segment, and yeah, hope you enjoy them. Okay guys, welcome to the demo. I'm just going to show you the painting process for painting the cover image for this. So I laid in a little base for myself, and now I'm trying to indicate that there are some bushes or trees back there. I started with a darker color and then used lighter colors moving forward to create the appearance of dimension and the appearance of light catching some leaves. So now I'm using a leaf brush to show that light is catching individual leaves inside this kind of larger foliage bush area. I cooled it down so that it would sit back in space more, like with atmosphere, and then I made it a little bit more purple and gray so that it would feel kind of more painterly and atmospheric back in the distance. And I'm using the bush brush again to add a little bit more texture. Now I'm going to paint grass in moving forward. So I grabbed the solid grass block-in brush, the first top one, and I'm laying in the colors, and I'm varying up the colors that I use so that I can indicate form and volume and indicate that the grass is kind of moving forward in space toward us, the viewer. I really like looking at Studio Ghibli reference for painting grass. I think that they just do a really great job of indicating a lot of detail in the most simple way possible. So now I'm blocking in the grass closer to us, and I'm using the grass brushes that have a little more dimension to them so that it really feels like, you know, the grass is moving forward in space toward us, the viewer. And I want it to feel like it's getting longer as it moves toward us. It's like flatter in the distance, and then as it moves toward us, it feels more rounded and dimensional and taller, because of the perspective. And I also want it to feel like the ground is kind of rolling, like it's got some hills. I want it to feel like it's got like a little dip and then it comes up again. I don't want it to feel like it's just like totally flat ground. I want it to feel a little bit more natural. So now I'm using the texture brushes, and I'm brushing, varying the brushes and varying the color and just brushing on some texture detail to start indicating blades of grass in this field. And I'm using some of the brushes with the more like blending settings on so that I can blend some of the hard edges out. I created a multiply layer to add shadows on top now using one of the softer brushes. I want it to feel like there's like a tree casting a shadow on the ground or something like that. And I like using the block-in brushes even for stuff like that, because then I maintain the texture in the shadows, and I just feel like it looks a lot more natural. Shadows can actually do a lot of heavy lifting for us when it comes to painting foliage and grass. The edge of the shadow is a really great place to add in like little details, and it will imply a lot of detail over the whole like field area. So now I'm trying to like add in some bushes. I want this to be a really natural looking like wild field. Like I want it to feel like wilderness. So I am varying up the colors that I'm using and just trying to add in lots of like biodiversity and little plants in, so that it can have the appearance of a very like overgrown foresty kind of field, like not someone's lawn, more like something that you'd stumble across in a clearing. So the way that I get that appearance is by adding in lots of different little plants. And that's part of the reason that I included so many brushes in this set, because I like to have the option of adding in lots of different plants. And I also feel like it feels a lot more natural and a lot less digital when there's a lot of variation, because using the same brushes over and over again, it can start looking a little bit stamp-like. But when I vary it up like this, I find that it feels a lot more natural and organic and less digital, and that little bit of painting that we do on top afterward like really helps solidify it and make it feel like it's a very natural organic space and not like a stampy looking digital space. Not that there's anything wrong with it looking digital or stamp-like. This set was just my intention, like when I made these for myself, was for it to be used in a more kind of painterly way and for them to be able to be used in like a lot of different ways. So that's why I included so many different brushes. Now I've got wildflower brushes going, and I'm just varying up my color and trying to add in a bunch of different wildflowers and flowers to this space to make it feel like a really natural, overgrown, flower-filled field. And so I'm using like different shades of orange, and I'm going to bring in some pinks. There's a lot of different wildflower brushes in here too, so that we can vary up the species of wildflower a lot, because often when I was looking at reference for wildflower fields when I was building this brush set initially, I just noticed how many different flowers there would be in like one area, because when there is the conditions to grow one type of flower, often there's the conditions to grow many types of flowers. So I just wanted there to be lots of possibilities, and I love the appearance of having like a bunch of different flowers of different colors all kind of in a field together in the same area. I think it looks really pretty and very kind of like Studio Ghibli-ish, very Arietti appearance. So I'm using the flower stalk brushes to brush in like the little tall flowers, adding in some that have not bloomed yet, especially in the area that is more shadowed, because maybe the ones that are in shadow more often have not bloomed yet. Then I'm adding in this kind of dimensional grass up front, in this kind of patch that's right by the camera. It's supposed to feel like we're right in there with it. Adding in all these different little plants, because even up here, I still want it to feel really nice and overgrown. Those plant brushes are really nice for adding in silhouettes, because they don't have a ton of detail, but it's good to kind of establish silhouette with that. Then if we wanted to take this to the next level, we could go in and paint on top of that and paint in the detail and the dimension, pull up some reference. It's just kind of providing us with some basic outline shapes that are a good jumping off point. And I don't really take this piece for the cover image past the jumping off point. I'm just kind of leaving it at this, rough, almost like a study or a quick block in, a color key, just getting the feeling of what I want it to feel like. This like lit, sunny, maybe spring field. But always you can do a little painting on top. I actually am doing a little bit. You can see I'm coming in with just some basic Clip Studio paint brushes and just blending it out a little bit, making it feel a little softer, just adding a few little hints of detail and organic variation here and there. And that can go a long way, just doing a little bit of like painting on top of these brushes and adding little highlights and shadows. Like that can really make it look like the whole thing is painted. If you do just a little bit here and there, then it will feel a lot more organic and painted and have a lot more dimension. So that is also kind of how I intended for these to be used. Like it's difficult to get a brush that is gonna be just enough for every situation on its own, but it's a good way to like kind of lay a groundwork in, and then we can add little highlights and add little shadows in. And when we do that together, on top of the brushes, then it can start feeling like a much more painted environment, a much more like painted space. So here I'm just painting in some little highlights, little details, and even just a little bit that I do here, just really basic, highlight and detail painting, I feel like starts elevating it, it starts elevating the piece and making it feel more dimensional and feel more painted overall. I add like stalks to the flowers. That's something that I like doing, painting the little stalks in behind the flowers, making it feel like solid and rooted in the ground. Just all those sorts of little details, I think, do a lot to make the piece feel more real. We're drawn to the end here, so hopefully this was useful. I love seeing everything that people make with these brushes, so if you want to tag me, then totally do so I can see it. I try to look at as many as I can. I miss them sometimes just because my messages can get really full, so please know it is 100% not personal. If you tag me and I miss it, I know that I've missed some, but I'm trying to see as many as I can when people tag me because I think it's really fun to see them. So enjoy, and I'll see you guys next time I make a set.